Or if you're in a restaurant, how much do you pay for this?
400.
Now guess how much farmers sell this per kilo?
200?
40 pesos.
What? No.
Yeah.
It honestly comes down to a value perception. Do we think our ingredients are good enough to stand with the rest of the world versus just dismissing the idea that a local ingredient could be absolutely delicious and could rival some of the best that the world grows? And I think once you kind of reframe it in that way, you start understanding how special local varieties of agriculture products that we have and how we can value more the people who are actually putting in the work and growing them. But we have to give them the absolute best chance of survival, but not just survival, of being able to thrive.
When it comes to kamatis, part yun ng mirip po natin eh. Sa atin, bawang, sibuyas, kamatis. That has always been part of us, of the culture.
Kami nga talaga ang nagpapakain sa mamamayan. Parang commitment muna sa sarili mo saka sa bayan.
We don't want to buy at a price where pamigay na lang. We want to make sure that they feel like I took care of these for you and I can earn a living wage from this.
I find joy sa pagpa-farm if the older generations are giving up and they are not encouraging new generations. Sino po yung susunod? At the end of the day, we're helping to feed the people and that's enough na panghawakan ko to be a farmer.
Our team went to this town to document a large harvest of tomatoes that is bound for Manila. Along the way, something caught our attention, an heirloom variety of tomato called Kinalabasa.
Ito yung heirloom na kamatis dito namin sa Ilocos. Tawag nila dito, dalupakpak, kumalabasa, at saka rusping. Pero wala pong natitinda dito sa store na seeds nito. Kasi ito, mano-mano pag hinog na, bibiyakin ko dito. Tapos kukunin yung mga buto. Ito, mas maano ng mga matatanda kasi sabi nila, mas matamis daw. Mas makatas. Pag nagsisigang ka, ito daw yung pwedeng ihalo. Maraming ginagamitan to, binuburo pa nila to, kahit ilang buwan gamitin, pwede. Ganito po gumawa ng seedling ng kamatis. Bibiyakin dito sa gitna, tapos pipigain sa lalagyan. Ito lang buto yung kukunin. Pag kuha mo ng seedling, dapat ganito ang kahinog. Ito, ipapakain sa mga baka o kambing. Ganito muna ng 3 araw. Tapos hugasan ko ng pag matanggal na tong kulapot. Mayroon balat tong buto eh. Ibibilag sa araw hanggang matuyo. Ito na po yung complete na binhi ng kamatis. Ganyan na. Pwede nang i-seed ulit. Hindi ko maiwan-iwan to kasi yun ang bilin sa akin ng father ko. Huwag ko daw walain tong seeds na to kasi mas marami daw nakakagusto to.
We made our way to the main market of Batac, Ilocos Norte, one of my favorite ones in the whole country. Unfortunately, since shooting this a few months ago, the market has since burned down and is currently being rebuilt by the community. I wish them all the strength to rebuild this essential cultural center.
The one thing I love about this region is each time I come here, I will always see ingredients I do not recognize that I don't know how to use. And I think Ilocos take real pride in their produce. And you can see a massive variety on display. And I love that it still has this kind of like Sunday market, bagsakan feel where people lay out their produce on the ground. I'm sure there's some kind of like official system in terms of who gets the stall, but a lot of public markets in the Philippines are now kind of going through a whole modernization. And the issue with that is these vendors that don't necessarily have a formal place to sell their produce. Those are just coming in when things grow from time to time, are actually getting displaced because of this formal arrangement for public city markets. So I really do think that there's a middle ground to be found. In Europe, usually when you have this like mozzarella and stuff, these are the ones that are really prized. And in the Philippines, these are freaking delicious. The problem with these tomatoes is that they're very hard to travel. So they have a very soft skin. So compared to these native tomatoes, which are a bit harder, and which are the ones that you find in Manila, unfortunately, most people in Manila, Cebu, and everything will never experience the joy of biting into a beautiful Kinalabasa tomato. Morning po. Kayo po nagtanim to? And lahat yung farm kinalabasa? Yung variety? Pwede po na tikman isa?
Pwede po.
Okay. Kano pa layo yung farm nyo?
Yung malayo rin ang bundi.
Mga isang oras?
Pagpunta tayo doon, mga 30 minutes, sir.
Mga 30 minutes. Okay, so this traveled 30 minutes. It's been picked probably this morning, and it's already a little bit soft. Imagine this in a box, steaming because there's no cold chain to it, traveling from Batac all the way to Metro Manila, 8-10 hours, depending on how many stops they're making. So you can imagine when this gets to Manila, it is completely ruined. So most of the time, I've actually had it sent to me before. It's sent in its green form like this. Because an ingredient isn't the way you think it should be, like tomatoes equal red, doesn't mean that they don't have a culinary use to it. One of the problems in the Philippines is we have this tendency of thinking of, especially in the big cities, you think of perfect produce. You will only use what you think an ingredient should look and smell like. But every ingredient, and that's something that the Ilocos region can teach you, has culinary usage in its different life forms, right? So this one, ripe, is so good. Like it's tart, it's a little sweet, not too sour, not too watery. This with some salt, some olive oil, maybe some cheese if you want, but really just salt and olive oil would be perfect. And here we have the green one, way firmer, but still completely okay to eat. Crunchy, way more acidic. This with your Filipino ensalada preparation, heavy on the vinegar, heavy on the calamansi. The liquid bursts out more aggressively as well, would be perfect. But also great, like if you're in Mexican cooking, they cook with a lot of green tomatoes. You can make green salsas with it and everything like that. So the idea is nature should work for you, you should work with nature. And so whatever it gives you, you can make something with it. Or so good. Salamat po. So lahat to native?
Native to lahat to, sir. Pinatanim namin to, 1 month yung seedlings.
Apo.
1 month din. Before nga
To grow.
grow at
Tapos
magbunga.
harvest.
2 months
Total.
lahat, sir.
Lahat 2 months.
2 months.
So 2 months lang in isang year
Yan, sir.
may kamatis.
Mm.
Oh, wow. Tapos yung mga 10 months, dormant lang.
Wala na. Palay na tsaka mga mais na ko, sir.
Palay mais. Mais, okay.
Yes, sir.
Morning. Yan.
Yan ang yung pinipitas namin.
You come to a region like Ilocos Norte and you realize the importance of tomatoes. We have this idea that tomatoes were imported, and probably used because of the Spanish. But if you look at the different dishes in Filipino cuisine, and you'll realize that tomatoes are actually absolutely everywhere, from ensalada to your stews to your soups. They're such an essential part of our dishes, yet you see something as simple as a tomato and you think, okay, sustenance, but it's charged with so much cultural power, and it also kind of showcases everything that is going right and also potentially going wrong with the nation. The Kinalabasa tomato really represents Filipino agro biodiversity. When people say that food is not political. Food is extremely political because absolutely everything goes into producing one of these, from the locality you are in, to the availability of fertilizer, to the uncontrolled heat that you get from the sun, which creates tomatoes that are way smaller than the previous seasons. This particular heirloom variety is something that most people in the Philippines would have never seen, or if they see it, they would probably think that it is imported and from a different country. These types of heirloom tomatoes are now gaining way more interest because of cultural heritage advocates and food advocates. And it just does tell a different side of the story of Filipino food and showcases that we do have really special ingredients. We just have to learn how to take care of them and use them in our food.
Sa ngayon kasi, naano yung heirloom kasi meron nang nagsipasukan ng mga hybrid variety ngayon. Kasi yung hybrid na yon ay potential yung kanyang yield. Sabihin mong talagang mataas ang ani. Iko-compare mo sa heirloom. Kasi ang heirloom kasi yung kanyang potential na limited lang yung kanyang ani, yung kanyang yield. Kaya yung ibang farmer, nakalimutan na yung mga ganun na product. Ito, noong unang panahon kasi mga ninuno namin, isang beses ka lang magtanim ng kamatis. Summer, mga dry season lang. Kasi hindi pwede itong pang rainy season kasi mabubulok siya, malulusaw. Para meron silang kamatis sa tag-ulan, preserve nila. Yung tawagin ay binuburo. Para ma-prolong yung paggamit mo sa susunod na mga ilang months na walang tomato, walang mabili, pag tag-ulan. And at the same time, yung kanyang sabaw ay ginagawang ulam. Ang proseso nito, hugasan mo lang, tapos ngayon ay bibiyakin mo to sa gitna. Bibiyak mo ganito, ito, magmimix ka ng asin, bubudbud mo lang yung dito, yung asin, para, kasi yung asin ang preservative ng asin. Tapos niyan, i-mix natin. Para halo. Pagkatapos niyan, na-mix na, pwede natin i-embak sa garapon. Matagal ito. Kaya lang kung gusto mo ng ulamin o kaya pwedeng 1 week lang, okay na siya. Pag na-ferment na, ulam na to. Tsaka yung magkakatas to kasi. Kung walang kamatis, pwede mong kunin, panghalo, ganun. Ang life chef nito, buwan ito eh. Wala na ata magiging farmer kasi iba na yung trend ngayon sa mga bata. Ayaw na nilang magbungkal ng lupa. Gusto na nila yung mga ibang courses. Kaya dapat merong dedicated na mga bata o kaya rin yung mga magulang, i-enhance nila kung gusto nilang masundan yung yapak yung mga tatay nila na farmer para hindi tayo maubusan ng farmer. Yan ang importante sa ngayon. Para hindi tayo lahat mag-i-import, di ba? Lahat ng import tayo. Kaya hindi natin kayang pakainin ng ating populasyon. Sa ngayon, alam naman natin na maraming nagugutom. Dapat lang meron tulong sa gobyerno para matulungan ng mga magsasaka, mangingisda, para naman sa kinabubuhay nila, hindi naman sila masyado agrabyado doon sa kinagisnan na profesyon. Halimbawa, kami, kung walang tulong ng gobyerno, talagang mahihirapan din kami. Lalong-lalo kung makamit namin yung potential yield sa iba't ibang produkto.
In January of 2025, commercially available hybrid tomatoes, not these ones here, some of them spiked at 300 pesos per kilo because of the typhoons that affected it and eventually drove the price up. But Funnily enough, 2 months later in March in 2025, in Nueva Ecija, farmers were selling their tomatoes, the same tomatoes, 4 pesos per kilo at farm gate. So why that massive difference is because of typhoon that they were having in their region, they were rotating crops in 2024 and then had a surplus of tomatoes that they didn't know where to sell in March of 2025. That just shows you how the farming industry and our local biodiversity and our food security is so attached to weather patterns, but also to demand and market dynamics. So how do we fix this? Most people will put that burden on the farmer and say, you know what? The farmers have a surplus of tomatoes. They should learn how to use those tomatoes in other ways. Look at where we are. Do you see a facility where you can add value to the product? No. So how would you add that facility? The government would have to step in and put in some sort of cooperative to buy all the tomatoes and then put the processing technologies in place so that the farmers could bring their produce and then add value to them. To put that burden on the farmers is completely unfair because you're asking them not only to work all day in the fields taking care of what they're growing, but you're now asking them to basically have another skill and have another job in terms of processing the tomatoes from this state to something that can be used year round. So there are solutions, right? But it's not a solution that can only be put on one group of people. The private sector, the government have to step in, make those technologies available so that when you have produce in excess at its peak flavor, you can preserve them. And one of those methods is canning.
We learned that this large harvest of tomato is a direct order by a canning company.
So we're a family-run business, and I'm third generation. So we started as a family of can makers, and then as the decades progressed, we were looking for opportunities in the market. We entered can packing. Right now, we're actually the last local fresh vegetable cannery because we continue to work with vegetable farmers here in the Philippines. So that's one heritage that we try to continue and maintain. It's always a struggle every season, but that's one thing we're very proud that we can continue doing. So we started canning tomatoes in 2024. And actually, in 2024, it had already been a full year before we were able to can our first can. A lot of research went into this. But the reason why we started it was I got a cold call one day. Hey, there are these guys that are interested in tolling or interested in doing something with local produce. I didn't know who I was meeting. I don't know what it was about. In that meeting, it was a table full of different experts who were trying to figure out what to do with the tomato surplus. So I walked in not knowing where this meeting was going, but they told me, hey, have you seen that Facebook post that farmers are dumping tomatoes again? It's summer season. Right now, the prices in the bagsakan are less than 10 pesos per kilo. So a lot of farmers are just leaving, either they're dumping the crops right outside the bagsakan, or some of them don't even harvest anymore. Iniiwan na lang nila for fertilizer. At that point, I didn't know where the conversation was going, but we talked about like, hey, the restaurant industry is interested in this type of product. When we look at prices for imported brands, the prices have been going crazy, shooting high. Can you do something with the tomatoes? Because right now we have an oversupply. On the other hand, the restaurant businesses are struggling to keep their costs down because imported tomatoes are sky high. So that started the conversation. They're not going to be exactly the same. So we want to make sure we understand what these restaurants were looking for. The consistency, the color, the sweetness, understanding can local tomatoes meet that requirement. And that led to the next stage of figuring out among the local tomatoes, which are the varieties that are closest, that can meet what the chefs want, but is also a variety that farmers are already well acquainted to.
Most people would be surprised to find out that most tomato dishes found in restaurants, from high-end places to regular eateries, use canned tomatoes for sauces, from pastas to pizzas to stews, with the exception of specific dishes or raw preparations. To learn more, we sat down with Chef Rhea, a staunch advocate for local produce, in her newly opened BGC restaurant, Flower Pot.
Tayo, pag nag-harvest tayo ng kamatis, makikita nyo minsan green pa. And then, hahayaan na lang na mahinog pagdating sa restaurant. Other countries, it's vine ripe. They're picking it kapag talagang hinog na sa puno. So, dun pa lang, kahit same pa ng variety ng kamatis yan, magkaiba na agad yung lasa. So, in terms of taste, I would say it really depends on where the source is. Saan mo kinukuha yung kamatis. But at the same time, when it comes naman to the restaurants, importante yung space. I mean, it's not just about the ingredients or the tomatoes. We are operating 2 restaurants. One restaurant in Tagaytay, our kitchen is much bigger. We decided for that restaurant that we only use fresh tomatoes. But using fresh tomatoes also will take time. Meaning to say, if you cook it from scratch, it will take a lot of time, storage space. So that's why when it comes to restaurants, most often than not, ang preference, can. So it's more convenient. As chefs, if it's ripe, it's much better for us. So we educate our farmers. We tell them that it shortens our production and waiting time. If we will buy ripe tomatoes, right there and then, pwede na namin siyang lutuin.
Ako si Anita Mendoza. Dito kami nakakuha ng pwesto ng pagkain. Pero matagal na ako nagtitinda ng gulay. Kamatis kasi, pansigang, pansarsyado. Yung kamatis, pansigang talaga namin lagi. Yan o. Kasi pag puro sampalok lang, pangit tingnan yung sabaw. Basta may reject na kami, sasama na namin sa pagluluto dito. Kaya kung magbenta ako, marami. Kasi hindi na namin babayaran yon. Kunti, mga reject. Kasi yung iba, kaya naman gusto maganda para maibenta nila ng tingi-tingi. Pero pagka panluto lang, kailangan lang, reject lang. Nasa lasa na lang yun, gagawin mong masarap, di ba? Ang reject, pangit lang tingnan. Pero pag niluto mo siya, para na ding good yun.
Ang association namin ay Sanghera Naganakan Farmers Association. May 43 na member at ako po yung kasalukuyang presidente ngayon, sir. Pagkakaroon ng association, sir, maganda kasi minsan nagtulong-tulungan. May nalalaman ka tungkol sa itaas. Nakukuha kami na inputs. Pag-registrado yung association, sir, mabilis kang makakahingi ng tulong sa gobyerno. Nakilala namin yung FFI, sir, tulong sa DA, sir, sa region. Inirekomendar naman kami sa Tosen. Nung nakilala namin si Tosen, nagkaroon kami ng project na magtanim ng kamatis. Fix ang presyo. Kahit mura dito, nakapix pa rin doon. Maganda. Umiram kami ng truck sa Kadiwa. Yung problema lang namin, yung diesel saka toll gate.
Before the season starts, we talk to the co-ops about how much they're going to plant, and we talk about what the requirement for the season is based on the interested pre-committed orders for the season. And that means we will talk about these are the delivery slots that are available that we will process, and for each delivery, this is how much we're expecting to arrive. We work with them on the exact range of acceptable tomatoes because we need to make sure that it's in the consistency that we want and need. Now it's Feb 2026 and it's the first delivery of the season. The crops for today, these were crops that were planted right after the last typhoon. So depending on when exactly the last typhoon of the year was, that's when they start planting. So our first delivery for this year is from Ilocos Norte. We work with 2 to 3 co-ops depending on the season, and we talk to each of the co-op heads. Each of them will represent around 30 to 40 farmers. And they're the ones who will decide who is going to get loaded, who's going to come.
So, nag-harvest na kami ng kamatis ngayon. Marami kami dito. iba't ibang grupo yung mga nag-harvest na yon. Marami kami, mga babae din yung mga taga-pitas. Kailangan hinog namin siya pitasin kasi pagdating dun sa Tosen, ipaprocess na agad tsaka ilalata na.
One of the things we're very clear about is that we want them to deliver vine-ripened tomatoes. If fortunately you've had the chance to taste the difference between vine-ripened versus not, it's a world of difference. There's so much more flavor. The color is much better.
Pag nag-harvest, siyempre, kailangan din pagsusort, piliin mo yung mga malalaki at saka mga pulang-pula, talaga yun yung pangbiyahe. Yung mga nasira na dun sa naulog kanina, sir, hindi na pwedeng biyahe. Pakain na lang sa baka o kaya tatapon na lang. Wala na eh. Wala nang magagawa, sila na. Pera na, maging bato pa. Tapos yung sorting, lalagay na sa crates, tapos kikiluin na. 2 kilos kasi yung crates, kailangan laman 23. Kasi pag masyadong puno, talagang masisira yung mga nasa ibabaw. Pagkatapos makompleto yung crates, i-loading na, kakarga na dun sa sasakyan. Tapos pagkatapos nun, ibibiyahe na. Pagkatapos kasi ng pag-loading, tarong dediretso na dun sa Bulacan. Kahit na at least volume yung kinukuha sa amin.
The problem is farmers can probably earn 2/3 of the year if they plant right. The important thing is that they don't go through a season where luging-lugi sila. And unfortunately, that usually happens during summer because there's oversupply. So what we do is when there's oversupply, we come in and we tell them, we will buy at this price. Whatever happens in the bagsakan, kahit na sobrang baba yun, we will buy at this fair price. And that price we've determined based on, we've asked them, how much do you spend on your inputs? How long does it take you to actually care for these crops to reach the maturity? What are all the things that you have to do to spend to bring it down to us? Because we want to make sure it's fair. We don't want to buy at a price where pamigay na lang. We want to make sure that they feel like I took care of these for you and I can earn a living wage from this. So we went through that process. We talked to several provinces to make sure that it's consistent. Because of course, different areas will have different challenges on how to take care of their crops.
Bulong, sir. Ha? Bulong. Bulong. Meron naman, sir.
While we have lots of different growing areas in the Philippines, our connectivity is what handicaps us. Aside from being separated at times by seas, we are relegated to use substandard road networks, which come with their own sets of issues. Even if the harvest is perfect, the transport environment and the road is the challenge.
Even if the window for working with vine-ripened tomatoes is very short, there's no problem for us because the day that it arrives in the plant, we process it the same day. So by the evening of the day it arrives, it's already canned and packed. Working with that very short window is very difficult and stressful, but it allows us to get the best flavors of the season.
After receiving ng mga kamatis, pinag-iiwalay yung mga reject at saka yung mga good na mga tomatoes. And then, we proceed to step 2, hugasan na siya or yung tinatawag nating washing. Tinatanggal dito yung mga residual pesticides or kung meron pang mga nakadikit na crown or may mga dumi. After washing, yung slating process ay ginagawa upang madali mabalatan ang mga kamatis. Ito ay dumadaan sa mainit na tubig upang umiwalay ang balat doon sa buong kamatis. After blanching, nandun na tayo sa peeling process kung saan ito ay binabalatan. Pagkatapos nito, nandun na tayo sa can filling, inilalagay na ito sa mga lata na nahugasan na. Habang ginagawa ito, ginujuice yung mga kamatis na napili para gawing puree. Kailangan kasi sa isang canned product, meron siyang packing medium. Dadaan siya sa sealing process or kung saan yung mga lata ay nagkakaroon ng mga takip. Ito ay tinatawag na hermetic sealing para hindi na mapasok ng kahit anumang mikrobyo. Pupunta na siya dun sa mga malalaking vessel na nandun sa loob ng planta kung saan ito ay niluluto. Ito ay tinatawag na horizontal still retort. Pinapasteurize ang mga nakalatang kamatis upang mapatay mga mikrobyo na hindi magiging safe for consumption yung produkto sa mga consumers. Pagkatapos nito ay pupunta na siya dun sa post-process area or dun sa palamigan ng mga lata upang ito ay ma-label na. Kinabukasan, ine-evaluate ng mga QA na naka-assign sa laboratory. And then, ito-transfer siya sa mga warehouses and then proceed to distribution.
These are canned whole tomatoes. Now, canned food in general, people have a very bad outlook on because they're thinking of things like canned tuna or canned corn or canned vegetables. And it's like, oh, it's not super fresh. It's not at peak harvest. It's not all these things. But the reason why canned food exists was because it was a method of preservation back when refrigeration was not possible. And what canned food actually represents in its core is the most natural way of eating as humans, and that's eating with the seasons. When things are planted and when things are harvested at their peak, obviously, let's say you have a huge tomato field, you won't be able to eat all those tomatoes while they are at peak harvest. So what you do, you harvest everything when they're at their best, and then you process them at their best. So for example, in Europe, so you'd be able to eat canned tomatoes in winter. You'd actually be surprised. Some people, when tomatoes are not in season, meaning they're not being harvested in those actual cities or towns or localities, they won't eat them in salads. You won't see them on the menu because they're not at their best. But you'll see a lot of tomato sauces and everything. But we do have to ask the question, if tomatoes are so integral to Filipino cooking and to Filipino food, where do these tomatoes come from? You'd be surprised to know that none of these tomatoes that are processed here like this are actually from the Philippines. Presenting you with the first canned Filipino product using Filipino tomatoes.
And this is the first in decades, and we're gonna find out why exactly that is. When it comes to tomatoes, perception is everything. How often do you guys eat tomatoes at home?
Pretty much
Almost
every
every
week.
day.
at
Yeah,
least.
almost every day.
Fresh or in can forms usually?
Fresh.
Okay. These two are local from the Philippines. We got native tomatoes. We got local salad tomatoes, which is just a different species and breed. We got local cherry tomatoes. These are hydroponic. And then these are French heirloom tomatoes, which were
1,000.
Oh my gosh.
so it's like 100 pesos a piece, more or less.
Yeah.
I want to see if you can actually, like everyone here can agree which one's the better tasting tomato. Okay, so we're gonna start with our native tomatoes.
Is it?
These are actually not bad. A little grainy, a little mushy. We're not exactly sure how long these stayed in a cold room to kind of keep them at this color, right? So most of the tomatoes harvested in the Philippines are like this so that they can actually survive the trucks.
It needs to be developed further through like cooking.
So that's why in the Philippines we either gisa the hell out of it or we add a ton of vinegar, dressing. So it becomes a vegetable, but just a vegetable that doesn't carry much
Sangkap
flavor,
lang talaga.
which is fine, right? Okay, Janet, what do you expect this to taste like?
Siguro mas masarap kasi mas mahal.
Totoo naman, no?
Okay, let's try it. No bias. Grab one. Let's do a whole one. Do a whole one. Cheers, 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 cheers.
Most expensive tomato. Hey.
Okay.
Hey.
Right? The body feel? You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's like when you eat a miracle fruit tas mag-shot ka ng vinegar. That's how sweet it is to me. But it's so expensive.
Yeah, I know. Okay.
But it's so good.
Take the price off the table, right? Obviously, it's expensive because it's here, right? When you have it here, it was basically harvested 4 days ago.
Okay.
From like a farm south of France. So that's why it's pricey.
Right.
If you were in Europe, though, you'd probably pay the same price for this as you would your salad tomatoes here.
Yeah.
And all of this to say that the tomatoes that we have are not great for salads or for fresh iterations. And again, that's not a problem. Like you can't load that expectation in our produce and say you should taste like that when you don't, right? It's a very different thing. The closest that I've gotten locally that tastes like naturally really tasty are the heirloom tomatoes. Next step is, do you think you'd be able to tell the difference between the most expensive standard of tomatoes worldwide, which are San Marzano tomatoes, versus our local tomatoes that are processed in the same way? But for that to be fair, I need you guys to blindfold. Okay, I want all of you to think about this from the context of you're gonna make a sauce with this. You're gonna cook it down, right?
Right.
Okay, open your mouth. You ready for the next one?
Yeah.
2. Okay. Yeah, okay. With your right hand, just put if you like number 1 or number 2 better. 1. Oh, this is actually not what I expected. Okay, open your eyes. Remove your blindfolds.
Ouch.
Okay, which one do you guys think was number 1?
I think number 1 was San Marzano.
Okay, Martz, which one do you think number 1 was?
I'd have to guess this one.
Okay. Ito number 1? Ito, in you?
Ito is Filipino.
So, the Filipino one was number 1.
Oh.
So 3 of you picked it to be better. So the Filipino one has way more acidity, way
But
more
it's
sweetness,
sweet,
it's way
yeah.
lighter. I feel like I could do a lot with this. This I feel like would be hard to work with because that deep flavor would always be there. So that just goes to show this wasn't planned at all, that a Filipino canned tomato product can beat out a foreign one. This could go way lower as long as the volume and as long as the demand is there, but it shows you that there's hope and there's opportunity for anyone in the Philippines who's making a red sauce stew, pizzas and pastas that eventually could use Filipino canned tomatoes, which means they would fully support Filipino agriculture and Filipino tomato farmers. And that's the goal for all of this.
We work with the DA. They help us, they introduce farmers to us, farm groups. They support them sometimes with seeds or tech support. We've also met and been working closely with a group called Farm Forwards Initiatives, FFI. They've done a lot of bridging for us and the farmers because we found that dealing with local farmers is really a trust-building exercise.
Advocates are a crucial part of the agriculture industry in the Philippines, and specifically to inform all consumers about the livelihoods of farmers, but also the reality of farming in the Philippines. They help build a better avenue for everyone, from the farmers up until the final consumers.
To us, it was a shocking realization na there was a gap that needed to be filled. And so from that beginning became an advocacy that, hey, we have to help the farmers stop talking to just the middleman, but to be able to communicate directly to the people that use their products, the food service industry and the consumers. If you empower the farmers to go directly to the buyers, then there's so much more for them to benefit. Realizing this, that's when we decided, okay, panindigan na natin to. We now have to help the farmers do this sustainably. There's another aspect to this, which is yung nagtatapon. There was a time wherein the tomatoes were being dumped. That was big news all over the Philippines. And that is when FFI was built, or Farm Forward Initiatives. The farmer often does not think of their entity as a business. Yun ang chine-change namin. Gusto namin, I'm a farmer, I'm a businessman. We formed FFI so that we can now institutionalize all of these efforts to help the farmers. Hindi lang siya parang, hindi ka lang magtatapon ng tulong minsan, kundi what you will be doing is helping them live sustainable farming lives, no? Professional lives as farmers na maiakyat natin ang antas ng kalidad ng kanilang produkto, pati ng kanilang sarili as farmer. I want them to be proud to be farmers, no? And if the generations see na pwede ko naman palang panindigan ng pagiging farmer ng family ko because it's profitable, then mawawala na yung dati kasi we were also afraid that there will be no next generation of farmers and that food sustainability would be an issue in the Philippines. Now, if you see at my back, you will see a lot of young farmers really selling their products. And that is very encouraging. So, yung dati natin sinasabi na natatakot tayo that food sustainability will be a problem is slowly being addressed by simply giving them a brighter future as farmers.
For the longest time, hindi po natin maiiwasan na there's a notion na even me, my parents would tell me na mag-aral ka because farming is hard. And that's real. And yun po kasi yung nakikita natin as a second generation child of a farmer, nakikita naman natin na, there are people who are willing to help you, who has the same mindset as you, na sana like other countries, ma-elevate sana natin yung status ng farmers na we are more than just farmers. Nakita ko po na there's more than that and that we are encouraged then na wag umasa sa middleman. Instead, kaya naman po pala ng farmers to talk directly to markets.
February 28, 2026. The United States and Israel attack Iran. The war pushed global oil prices higher, and the effects were felt all the way in the Philippines. More expensive fuel meant higher costs for transport, farm machinery, fertilizer, and bringing produce to the market. For farmers already working on thin margins, every increase made food more expensive to grow and harder for families to afford. Balintawak is an entry point of all the land produce in Luzon. Think of it kind of like a funnel. From karinderya owners to buyers to distributors, everyone buys here. And all of them are affected by prices caused by global events.
Kung po pwede, ibaba na ng todo yung kurudo. Kasi napakamahal eh. Ang gasol napakamahal din. Ilang araw lang ang gasol sa amin. 4 days ang isa. Sa amin, hindi namin mataasan. Naaawa kami talaga sa kumakain. Kaya sabi ko, kung tutusin talaga, parang hindi ka kumikita.
Masakit sa bulsa. Kasi halos nag-triple na yung krudo namin, sir eh. Pero sa bentahan naman, yung patungan ng presyo ng gulay pares pa rin. tumas nga yung diesel, yung presyo ng gulay hindi naman tumaas. Kunwari, yung dating pinapatong namin ng mababa pang gulay, ganun pa rin yung kaya ng mga mamimili. Kaya parang walang kinikita eh. Kasi hindi rin kaya ng buyer pag tinaasan mo. Ganun din yung rason nila, mataas doon ang diesel nila. Hindi na raw daw mamamalingke. Kaya naiiwan yung kamatis minsan.
While putting this film together, we thought we were only going to use archival photos and videos of the tomato surplus that happened. But lo and behold, we saw it for ourselves.
Tinanim ko noong November 15. Pagkatapos ng uwan and harvest nung March. Marami pa bunga noon, hindi namin hinarvest kasi ganun nga, hindi na bibili sa enbat. Lugi na yung labor lang ang kumikita. Mahulog na lang dyan para maging fertilizer na lang. Mababa ang presyo tapos tumaas ang upa na mag-deliver sa enbat. Dati 150 ang per kilo, ngayon 250 ata ang singil ng mga iba Pati yung panang manok, tayo ng manok, tumaas rin. Dati 110, ngayon 260, 270 ata ngayon. Pati yung pang spray, abono, mas marami pang magagastos kaya yung papasok sa amin. Kaya yun, pinabayaan na lang namin kasi yung saka yung pagod. Sayang. Kasi talagang wala tayong magawa. Lumas ang krudo. Talaga konti ang mag-pipitahin sa garden.
Oversupply happens when there's lack of planning, lack of coordination with end users and the farming community. There should be government intervention. Farmers and people will count on summer as the peak of harvest. They know that it will be safe to harvest. So they will work their way back, count the number of days, and that's when they will plant. Kaya lang, it's always the market. Lagi naman tanong ng mga farmers natin, sino ang market? Asan ang market? Kaya lang nangyayari yon late in the game. Natanim na So, antayin na lang nilang tumubo. Pag namunga na, dun sila magtatanong, sino bang bibili nito sa akin? Ang laging mindset, bagsakan. It's always trading post. But kapag bumagsak na ang presyo sa trading post, nakikita naman nila yan on a daily basis. So, they will decide for themselves, lalo na ngayon na may crisis. Kung ito na lang ang makukuha ko, ito ang presyo ng trading post, magbabayad pa ako na mamimitas. Huwag na lang. Hayaan ko na lang mabulok sa puno. And with the oil crisis, double whammy yun.
Dito sa Vizcaya, may highland at saka lowland na area po kami. Nagsabay-sabay yung mga nagtanim ng kamatis ngayon, first quarter, second quarter, at ibang gulay, konti yung demand. Tapos tumaas po yung gasolina natin. Yung mga trucking na iba, talagang nagdagdag ng trucking mula sa farm papunta dito sa Envat. Dati is umaabot lang dito sa Nueva Vizcaya, 1 peso to 2 pesos per kilo. Pero ngayon, umaabot na lang 2 pesos to 4 pesos per kilo. Dagdag pa yung sa mga farmers kasi sila yung pupuntahan kasi sila yung nagpapatracking, hindi naman babayaran ng mga nagbebenta.
12 years na kami dito. Nag-uupa kami dito, 20,000 per year. Kung yung halimbawa kamatis, 3 beses kang magtanim, puro bagsak, abonado ka sa upa. March ang matandang kong 4 pesos ang per kilo. Yung big pa kasi 3 klase yung classify ng kone. May big, yung medium at saka small. Lalo na yung small, puro hindi nakukuha. Big lang ang kinukuha kung mababa ang kamatis. Pero kung mahal ang kamatis, ang nauunang naubos, medium at saka small.
Nung April 6, yung kamatis namin dito, umaabot po ng nasa 10 kilos. Pero yung 10 kilos na sinasabi ko, yung magandang quality na ganitong size, big size. Pero yung size po ng medium, ganito, mga small size, umaabot na yan ng 3 pesos per kilo. Minsan, nung nagdala yung farmers ng 50 crates, ang nabenta lang is yung big. So, ang nangyayari talaga dun sa small size at saka yung medium size, hindi na yun nabenta. So, ang ginawa namin is talagang spoilage na po yan.
Itatapon na lang pag bumalik yung kwan para kung makuha lang yung crates, babaklon na lang. Kasi mas mahal yung crates kaysa yung bayad ng laman niya.
5 years ago, ang production cost namin dito sa Inbat ng kamatis is umaabot ng 12 pesos per kilo. Ngayong 2020, next first quarter, nakikita namin na umaabot na ng 20 pesos per kilo yung production cost namin sa kamatis. Lugi yung mga farmer kung below production cost namin po yung presyohan dito sa may trading post.
Kung gusto namin yung mas mataas sana, kahit man lang ang hiniling naman na farmer, hindi man lang bumaba ng 20. Para kung 20, at least hindi kami malugi, mayroon konting papasok. Pero kung yung 5 pesos, 6 pesos pababa, wala talaga. Katulad nung nagpapitas ako, 7 kami. Ang dumating na bayan ng kamatis 2.4. O yung 7 magkano na yun? 3.5. Kaya nagdagdag ako. Hindi naman pwedeng utangin yung labor kasi maintindihan mo rin yung mga nagkuhan. May pamilya at saka kailangan din nila. Minsan iniisip ko nga kung ano ang kasi parang kung iniisip ko parang ayaw ko na magtanim pero wala akong magagawa kasi paano yung mga nag-aaral, yung mga estudyante. Kahit gano'n, subukan pa rin na magtanim. Ang masasabi ko diyan sa mga gobyerno sana, pansinin nila yung mga farmer. Bakit hindi lang makontrol yung mga abono, yung mga pang-spray, insecticide, wala silang pakialam. Dapat remedyohan nila para hindi naman masyadong malugi yung farmer. Pag tatanim ako, bahala na. Ang problema ngayon yung pagpuhunan. Kailangan mangutang na naman.
We're not yet feeling it, but by us not feeling it means that it's really bad for them already. Sometimes we feel that if we're getting it cheap, that it's win for us. Agree? As a restaurateur, it is for me. But if you're conscious enough, reality check lang. Kung nabili mo siyang ganong kamura, sobrang sama na nun para sa taas. Or sa farmers as a whole. So I don't know if I should celebrate, if I should rejoice that I'm not feeling it yet. As an individual, no, not as a restaurateur. It's sad that I also don't get that share of their loss.
We cannot remove the fact na there is always demand and supply. Kaya nagkakaroon ng oversupply. Yun po sana yung tinitignan natin na as farmers, we can actually control kung ano yung pinoproduce natin. Siyempre, ang farmers kasi, ang gusto nila is talagang tons because they think about quantity. And yun din po yung tinitignan nila sa sales. Pero it's not all about tons and that meron kang direct market kahit po sabihin na natin na you're only talking about kilograms. If the price is sustainable, you are also sustainable as a farmer.
We spent this whole hour on tomato, but it was never really about that tomato. Change the crop and the story really doesn't change. Onions in Nueva Ecija, garlic in Ilocos, rice absolutely everywhere. A farmer plants, the weather goes bad, and a price that they had no part in setting decides their worth.
Moreover, I just can't get over the irony that the Philippines is facing a massive food security issue, yet every year we talk about rescue buys and we look at images of people throwing away tons of produce in the trash.
But we saw how it can work. We saw a canner take a surplus and turn it into a good product. We saw how a co-op can lock in a fixed price and stop waiting for a buyer to show up and actually start selling directly. The solutions are already here. They work. We've actually filmed them more than once. So the question is no longer why nobody has solved this. It's why these solutions are still so rare. Our land, yes, is fragmented, and that one farmer on less than a hectare is expected to choose the crop, borrow the money, survive the weather, find a buyer, and sell everything before that rots. That's asking a lot. But farmers working together can negotiate volume, they can secure contracts, and they can plan before the planting actually begins. Farmers earn more, buyers get a consistent product, the market becomes slightly less chaotic. The country has already created more than 1,000 of these groups, but they aren't the priority. We spend on seeds, fertilizer, and production. We help farmers grow more, but we invest far less in what happens after the harvest, the storage, the processing, and the buyer. That is how you end up producing more food without building a system capable of handling it. Basically, it has nowhere to go. The real question is whether we're willing to support the people who have already found a better way of doing things, or whether we will help them only when there's a crisis and then forget about them once the price recovers. The farmers are already and have done their part. What they're still waiting for is a system that they can depend on and that turns what already works into the norm and not just the exception. Resiliency is an asset, yes, but it's not a solution.
Ng Pilipinas, magaling, matalino. Bakit? Kaya nilang i-navigate yung extreme weather conditions ng Pilipinas. Sobrang init, pag alam nilang darating na yung bagyo, they've learned through the years. Capable? They're very much capable. It's just that there should be someone connecting them, and that's our role.
It's not just about getting the most from the farmers. It has to work for both of us. Because if they can't earn a decent living out of it, a living that can support their family, they wouldn't be doing it. So we always make sure that the equation works for everyone along the chain because we don't want to grow alone. We want that as the company grows, the communities we support are also improving.
Kami nga talaga ang nagpapakain sa mamamayan. Kami ang backbone ng kumbaga sa pagkain. Mahirap, matagal yung kita o kaya yung balik. Parang commitment muna sa sarili mo saka sa ibang, sa society, sa bayan.
I find joy sa pagpa-farm and parang naisip ko na if the older generations are giving up and they are not encouraging new generations, sino po yung susunod? At the end of the day, we're helping to feed the people and that's enough na panghawakan ko to be a farmer.
That's the tomato story. Now imagine what this could mean for everything else we grow. And maybe it's time we celebrate the people who feed us.